Good morning, everyone. I'd now like to call to order this meeting of the Human Resources, Governance and Stakeholder Relations Committee of Waterfront Toronto. And I've been advised that a quorum is present and it's appropriate to proceed. So welcome to all of you who are joining our meeting today. I'd like to remind you that the open session of today's meeting is being recorded. And at the conclusion of our meeting, just a reminder to directors that we will have a directors only discussion. So I'd ask all directors to please stay in the meeting. And also we are planning a shorter agenda today. We do have a board education session at 11 o'clock. So with that, I'll just move forward to our land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we're undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. In addition, Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that Toronto has historically been a gathering place for many Indigenous peoples, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is home today to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people today. So with that, we will move into first item on our agenda. And so we are approving the meeting minutes. May I please have a motion to approve the agenda for the meeting? Is there a mover? Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Raul. Motion carried. Declaration conflicts of interest. Do we have any conflicts of interest to declare? No, none declared. We can now move on to the business of the meeting. Thank you. So the next is the consent agenda. The first item of business is the approval of minutes of the open session of the November 9th, 2023 meeting. May I please have a motion to approve the November 9th, 2023 meeting open session? Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Raul. Motion carried. Now we will move on to the ESG update with Lisa Taylor. And I just asked Lisa, we will take this generally as read, but I'll ask Lisa to just briefly highlight any items that she'd like to bring to our attention and of course open up for discussion with directors. Lisa?
Thank you, Wendy, and good morning, everyone. Just want to highlight one item on the ESG report for this quarter, and it's on the top of the next page, Charmaine, and it relates to accessibility. Just wanted to highlight that following the release of our accessibility design guidelines for public space on the waterfront, as well as launching a new accessibility advisory committee, we also recently completed an accessibility internal audit, which was to determine our compliance with the requirements of AOTA, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And the audit results were recently shared as through Be Aware with the Farm Committee last month, noting an overall compliance score of 97%, with the 3% areas of non-compliance being related largely to our web content, so documents that are posted onto our website. And this is an area that MMP, who conducted the audit, commented was common to many organizations, and for which we're working on remediating over the next several months in advance with the January 2025 overall deadline for compliance. One I wanted to just highlight for the committee today, Wendy.
Wendy, if I could just add, yes. On the accessibility, we had an initial advisory group that helped us actually draft the guidelines for accessibility for public spaces. We then struck another advisory group that's focused on monitoring our actual implementation against those guidelines. I would say that the feedback we've gotten from all the advisory members from the first group and the second is that they feel very comfortable that we are committed and have shown that through the discussions and through the guidelines. So just credit to the staff that have worked on that with the advisory groups.
Thank you, George. I think that would be of particular interest to the committee, and certainly from my perspective, could that report be shared with the committee and potentially with the board, just as background material in the next?
Yeah,
absolutely. You're talking about the internal audit report, Wendy?
Yes, because it's it's just things are moving so fast in that space, and the the regulatory environment for for accessibility has changed. And I think understanding how it impacts our public spaces and our planning would be of interest to the board.
Yeah, we can definitely share. We have a summary slide deck, probably is the
Yeah,
slide.
exactly. And any questions for Lisa? No? Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. So moving to the Human Resources report, Rose has provided her written report on all human resources matters. And again, we will take this as read, but there's a lot of change in this area, as you're all aware of. So Rose, could you please comment on your report?
Absolutely, Wendy. Thank you. And good morning again to everyone. Just a couple of quick things to highlight, as Wendy mentioned. Happy to say that even with 4 voluntary exits, we still remain at in and around a 4% turnover rate, which is still consistent with what we've been seeing in the past quarters. Around organizational effectiveness, I'm happy to say that we cleaned up and closed up the office at 20 Bay Street and moved into T3. More to come on that in item 5. And most of the work that's been done this last quarter is in and around reworking the CEO and C-suite level performance management plans with the help of the HRGSR. Thank you, Rahul. We really appreciate your leadership on this. More to come in that in the closed session, but I'm happy to say that we've presented a CEO performance plan, a revised one, and we've also worked it up for the C-suite level, but we've given a 1-page highlight of that. Once we have the discussion and we've made any revisions that we need to, we will continue with the remainder of the senior management team to work this new program. And again, this new format is to set out so that we can align the business plan, the strategic categories around strategic priorities, organizational goals, and the how, which is really important for us. At this point, we're not deciding to change any of the performance plans for the rest of the staff, although we're going to look at making it a bit more efficient.
Yeah, it'll be a much smaller document, but we will start with the management team first.
And that's all I just wanted to say on this, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Any further questions for Rose on this piece? I know we'll discuss it more in the directors only, but I would like to have a special shout out to Rahul. He's been extraordinary, and thank you very much, George and Rose. And the materials are I think really I'm delighted. I'm absolutely delighted. So thank you very much. Greatly appreciated. Moving to the office move and HR update, Rose.
Absolutely. Thank you, Wendy. I've got George and Kevin on the line, obviously, too, then they can add anything that I may miss that they want to highlight. But I'm happy to say that we successfully moved into T3. It's a beautiful office, a great building. We reduced our occupancy space from 19,000 square feet to 14,000 square feet, although we do have a common area that's embedded into our rent. It's a great office. We moved down here, as all of you know, for economic scenarios. It was much favorable to move here. Plus, we wanted to be the leaders in moving other organizations down along the waterfront. We started working here in January, middle of January, January 8th. We have had great feedback from staff. They're happy about the office. There's different synergies. We're still working in a hybrid environment. We're moving to 3 days a week. And we've had different welcome days and different themes just to get staff down here and get engaged. There's more efficiencies going on that we have to work on, deficiencies, I'm sorry. And there are other areas in the building that Heinz is offering us, such as a gym. There's common space area. So it's really been a positive move, and we've had positive feedback. Kevin, I'm not sure if you want to add anything, or George.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say feedback from staff has been very positive. There's 2 issues probably that we're working on is with the landlord, which is the transportation between Union Station and here. So they don't have a bus going yet, but they have other accommodations for us. So fortunately, the winter hasn't been that bad, and staff have been actually quite reasonable on that issue. We do have some deficiencies that any new building has in terms of we still have to balance out the HVAC system. Part of the floor is very hot, part of the floor is very cold. Simple things though, but staff, given the space reduction, it's actually much more practical space. Raul's had a chance to see it. Alicia's had a chance to see it. It really is a much nicer. Our previous space was 25 years old. Really wasn't up to par with regards to the work environment. But more importantly, one of the challenges we have is there's not a lot of eating areas around our building. So we have a nice common space where people can have lunch. And it's similar to something that I had when I decanted Queen's Park. That space gets used a lot by our staff, not just for lunch, but to have mutual discussions, collaboration space. It's also, you'll get a chance when you come in to see it will open up from the boardroom out, so we use it for public meetings. So it saves us from having to reach out and look for hotel space for public meetings or other spaces. So I think overall, and I checked with my team again just to make sure that when I say people are very pleased, it's accurate, and I think it is true that people are very pleased with the new space. Kevin, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think you covered it all, George.
Thank you, George. Raul?
Just a quick comment. It is a lovely space, no doubt. And I think more importantly, it's going to enable the workplace strategy, particularly as it relates to the remote and the hybrid work. And for those who may have read this, there was a really good article in the New York Times over the weekend about the law firms in Lower Manhattan that were also making a similar move as many of us did. And coincidentally, we just moved ICD as well over the last couple of weeks into a very similar concept. So you can, if you read that article, you'll see a lot of the strategic impetus behind that, besides just the typical economic efficiencies. So it will be good to see how this plays out for Waterfront Toronto, but I think you're off to a really good start.
Thanks,
Thank
Raul.
you.
Wendy, the only other thing I would say is we benefited from the mass timber itself. So we've left a lot of the mass timber exposed, and it's one of the compliments we get when people come in. And it's not something we had to pay for. It's actually built into the building. So it was one of the reasons we moved from the environmental perspective here, but aesthetically and functionally, it's been great as well.
Well, thank you, George and Rose. I think it's, it's the health and wellness aspect is just critical, as you know, for staff, and also just the sort of new engagement platform. When we transitioned the Globe and Mail years ago to their new facility, everybody complained for about 5 or 6 years about what they were losing. And then when they moved in, they were joyful. And it's not easy to make, 900 journalists happy. So, but one of the things we did have with the Globe and Mail is we did have a shuttle bus from Union Station. It's still running. It's still very important, I think, for staff. So that would be my question, George and Rose.
Yeah,
when does it start?
There is a commitment. They're waiting for some additional tenants to come in.
I see.
So that's been the issue, but they've made other accommodations that actually have worked out for the temporary period. So we do have some accommodations to get to Union Station, and staff have used that. So
Offered by
the landlord, yeah.
Okay, good. So there will be regular shuttle service for staff.
Yeah, as soon as there's a critical mass in the building, they're going to expand that service, or they'll look at the service that they're providing right now, whether it works, and expand that. So we're in good discussions with them, and we'll make the assessment after we do this pilot that we're currently doing.
That's great, because the winter can be quite brutal down there, as you know.
Oh yeah.
And then the other question I have is the larger space for community consultation, which is so vital to our organization. What is the capacity?
That's a good question, Wendy. I'm sorry, I don't have that answer.
Yeah, we had it. We could get that for you. I don't know, Kevin, if you remember when we expanded the doors.
I don't know. I know that the boardroom has 18 seats around it, plus we have about another 12 on the side. When you open into the cafe, it's a good question, Wendy. Let's do a count for you. And because it's a very open space, even though there may not be seats, there's lots of space to congregate. So when you see it, you'll see how really big it is. It's almost a third of the office when you combine those spaces. But I I would hazard a guess that it's got to be 40 to 50 people at least, if not more.
On top of, you got the boardroom plus, so the boardroom fits, I think, 36, 38 people in total.
22 around the table and I believe 12.
12, yeah, so 36, and then another probably 40 or 50 if you put chairs in that open area.
That's great. So we could be close to 80 to 100 potentially for
Yeah.
a gathering. That's wonderful. Well, it's great
Yeah.
for both for, you know, workplace strategy and employee events, but also for outreach and to be able to have the community come and meet with us, you know, on our own site on the waterfront is just so lovely. You know, I think we've all spent many years in hotel,
Yeah.
low ceiling hotel, you know.
When we also have the common area just outside our office that we could also use for public meetings if we need to, that's open to us as tenants. Plus there's a
Right.
rooftop for the summer.
Yeah, there's a lovely rooftop that is available to the tenants in the summer as well, so that's great.
Fantastic. We'll all be coming for a barbecue soon.
Absolutely.
Well, we actually took Minister Surma up there on our tour so that she could see the site from the top of the building as well.
Okay, great. Drew?
I just want to reinforce this, and Wendy, your reference to the globe made me chuckle. Having spent 20 years in the old building, well, not technically because I was away a lot, but it was a real pit, although we reveled in the pitness. But the best part of the globe space is the space that's actually used for public events, right?
Exactly.
And I think it's been a big revenue maker. And we may not want to think about that, but we could think about it strategically, certainly with what you've described. It's not as big, but that, and especially the rooftop, from what I'm hearing, is something that could really be used strategically. The other point I just want to make is the wood aspect of it. So the Monk School, or U of T, is now building the next big tower. We're about 6 months in, basically at Bloor and Devonshire, and I don't know if there's any learnings there. I'm sure that the builders would know about yours and stuff like that, but they're well into it. So these will be the two big ones. This one is 12 stories and should be done in 2 years. So they should go down and look. I guess they probably already have.
Thank you, Drew. Any other comments for Rose and George on the HR office move? Okay. Then we'll move on into our closed session. Oh no, we have the consideration of the HR GSR committee mandate. So in our materials, directors will see a cover note and a copy of our committee mandate. And in accordance with the mandate, we are asking directors for their views on whether any changes to the mandate are warranted or whether any other measures are to be proposed to optimize committee effectiveness. And directors will note that we have asked for comments, if any, to be raised directly with me, or we can discuss in the closed or director-only session today. We have looked at a few tiny changes which we would like to discuss, I think, George and Ian, in the directors only. But if there are any other comments that people would want to raise today, of course, they'd be most welcome. Any thoughts, Drew?
No, I'm good.
Okay, thanks. Your hand is still up. That's
Oh,
why I
I'm
was paying
sorry. I'm
attention to you.
sorry. I'm sorry.
Raul?
Wendy, I'll have a couple more in session with the other comments, but I think the definition of stakeholders, I think it's worth diving into that. So we've actually got one in here, because I got to admit, I get a little bit fuzzy on exactly what group of stakeholders we're actually focused on.
Thank you very much, Raul. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay, very good. So we will discuss further in the directors only session. So now we are going into closed session. May I please have a motion to go into closed session to discuss item 8 of today's agenda? And I just want to remind everyone that any resolution considered in the closed session needs to be passed when we return to open. So we've now returned to open session and have resumed recording of the session. And there's one resolution arising from the closed session for us to consider. May I please have a motion to approve the November 9th, 2023 committee meeting, closed session meetings?
So moved.
Raul, Paul, thank you. Motion carried. So now we are going to be terminating the meeting, and I thought we'd maybe take 30 minutes, but we are at, I think, probably 22.
25, 24, yeah.
All
Record.
right.
I put Wendy in the F1 competition here. So.
I know. It's called Whip It Through. Okay, great. So having concluded the business of the meeting, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. So can I please have a mover? Thank you, Paul, Raul. Now declare the meeting terminated, and I just ask all directors to please stay in for the directors only session. And thank you very much, everyone.